Alright, so today we got a 04 Dodge Ram. It's having a problem when you get up to about 50, 55. The front end just shakes and we diagnosed it. It's going to be a torque converter, so we're going to change out torque converter and we're going to guide you along the process. First, we're going to start by disconnecting the negative battery terminal and then we're going to go from there. After you get the truck in the air, there's going to be a dust plate right there. It sits up in between the engine and the transmission. You got to take that off to access the torque converter bolts that are in there. So there's 6 15 mils that go around, and then there's 2 14s that go in there and in there. I'd make sure that you remember which bolts are where and mark them accordingly. So now we're gonna have to spin the motor to get out the torque converter bolts that are up in there. It's kind of hard to see. Right there. And in order to do that, you gotta spin the motor by the crankshaft. All right, there's gonna be 4 14 mil torque converter bolts. Get those out, separates the flex plate from the torque converter, and now we're gonna go back and disconnect the drive shafts, and then you gotta drop this plate that holds up the transaxle. All right, so we've disconnected the rear drive shaft and the front drive shaft that goes to the transaxle. I'd recommend putting the spline in a bag or keep them off the ground. Unfortunately, I'm working on a gravel driveway, so don't want any dirt or debris getting in there. For the bolts, they're gonna be 15. You're gonna wanna use an extension, and they're very tight, so I'd recommend using heat. Heat is gonna be your best friend. Next, we're gonna have to drop this down, and we're gonna have to put some pressure on the transmission because this holds up the transmission and the transaxle, and then we're gonna disconnect transaxle, get that out of the way, and then worry about the trans. Remember, this is important. The drive shaft's got to go in the same way it came out. We use paint pen, mark it on the shaft, and mark it up right there too. Same for the rear, same for the front. We got marks right there. It's got to go in the same way it came out. We got the ratchet stuck, so you got to use a wrench.
Alright, note to self while doing this. We tried using a ratchet and now it's stuck under there. So now we're using wrenches. We're gonna take this part off first, so that way when we unbolt these 4, we can just drop it all and then it'll just be this bracket, and then we just have to take off the intercase box.
Alright, the next part of the process is that we got that bolt out. Now they're working on these ones, so these are going to be 18 on both the nut end and the bolt end. We took the other side out, so now they're taking this side out. Impact. As you can see, impact is recommended for this. I would not try doing this with hand tools, although you can if you prefer. Alright, so next you're going to want to use a pry bar to help pry that center transmission mount bar out. And just like that, it should fall right out.
Alright, so right by the gas tank, we got to take out the transfer case bolts. And if you sit up in this little crevice right here, you can actually get to the ones on the top, all right there, with using an impact and long extensions. So that'll make our lives a lot easier instead of trying to fight with a wrench back there. Then we're also, in the meantime, going to take off this plate. All right, so now we got to remove these nuts connecting the transaxle to the trans, and in order to do that you need a 14 wrench. I found it easiest if you just take a hammer and just give them a tap. They come out pretty nice. If you have ratcheting wrenches, it'll make this job easier. Unfortunately, I don't. So just gotta keep working it. There are some on the top that are gonna be a fun, so we're going to update you when we get to those. So once you get all the bolts out, there's 2 there, and then there's 2 on top. The top ones are not fun. So we ended up using a wrench, and the other side a long ratchet and a socket. It's doable, but it's tricky. And now we're pulling out the transfer case. So there's,
You're gonna get.
so we'll leak trans fluid out. And just like that, it's out. There is a connector up top that you have to get, and a breather hose. And then you also have to disconnect the shift linkage right there. It just pops out. That's that. All right, so then you gotta remove all the transmission bolts. There's a few up top. I think there's 4 up top. They're mainly all 15 and 16 mils. The top ones are definitely a bitch. And then you got to remove this linkage, and then all the clips up here. There should be 2 on this side, 2 on that side, and then we've got the trans lines on the passenger side disconnected. And we plugged them up with spark plugs. Put a little tape on there so they don't leak. In a pinch, it works. So now we're gonna slip the transmission out of the engine, hopefully using a pry bar right here. So here we're fighting with pins on the transmission to engine and just using a pry bar and going back and forth trying to get it out. It is a little tricky, so don't get discouraged. You just have to keep working it back and forth, and eventually you'll be able to pop it out. Cool. All right, once you drop the transmission, you just gotta fight. There's 2 pins on each side. That's what we're fighting after you get all the bolts out. And then you don't have to take it all the way out, and the torque converter should be able to slide right out if you give it a little wiggle in. I can feel it coming. It's gonna be heavy though, so make sure the parts line up. Make sure everything looks the same. Just because they sell you a part doesn't mean it's gonna be the same, but these are similar. Yeah, now we're gonna take the fluid from this one, put it in that one, and throw it back in. No. All right, getting the torque converter in there is tricky. It feels like it goes in, but it has to go in 1 more notch. You just gotta keep twisting and fighting with it to get in. Now we're gonna take lithium grease and we're gonna goob the heck out of this. We're gonna goob the slide pins, and then we're gonna goob all around here so it'll be easier lining up with the X plate. After getting that all lubed, we start jacking it up to put it back in. Overall, this job wasn't that tricky, but I would recommend a couple friends or a couple buddies, as you can see, like we did, because it makes it a lot easier than doing it by yourself, unless you have like a lift and the proper jacks and equipment. But like I said, overall, went pretty good. And then it's just about putting everything back together how it was. And if you need, you can just reverse this video on the steps on how to do that. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe. Come on now.